Weather Wagers is back, and it is November. We are rolling through November with the gales of November blowing and some lake effect snow coming at you this week. We've got some actual major weather to talk about and some football games, too. Brett Thackera, Dan Tomaso with you. This is so much fun, Dan, because it's always fun to talk about. Well, I actually don't think it's fun to talk about lightning in the distance, but now we have some snow and some cold to talk about, all in the course of 2 months. Funny how that happens when the calendar starts to change.
Well, the calendar starts to change, and we went from a very, very warm and almost humid November to all of a sudden the season's waking up a little bit.
In central Pennsylvania, we had a record high just last Monday, I believe it was, and now, yesterday, we had our first little taste of snow and sleet. So the weather is changing, and some of the teams at the top are changing.
They are. And did we ever mention leading into this podcast that Big Ten is about weather ultimately, Big Ten football?
It is. And
there's going to be some big impacts here moving ahead the next couple of weeks.
And not just Big Ten, but of course, the NFL, too. We're going to get into that. Now, if you want to find us, you know how to do that by now, hopefully. If not, I did have somebody write me on Facebook today. We want you to log on and get us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify. And we also want you to write to us, Dan, because, again, we need some new ideas for side wagers. Throw up the email address there, weatherwagers@gmail.com. We want to hear from you about what games you may want us to cover, or some ideas if you want us to have some fun with these side wagers we've been doing, because we've been having fun. My son thought it was the greatest thing. I don't know why he thought this, but the mayonnaise coffee, he loved watching the video of you drinking that.
Well, I have to admit, I think it's one of the weirder things I've tried.
Yes.
I still don't get the combination whatsoever, and I don't know how in the world a human could have that every single day. I will say it again, my mouth just felt greasy the rest of the day. It was a very odd feeling, and I think I had heartburn from it too.
Yeah, I believe that. All right, it is time to review last week, because I don't want to brag, but I have made a charge, and Dan, I will tell you, it was a pretty good week for one of us. The other one of us, not so much. There are the records, folks. If you're watching us on the YouTube stream, 6-3 for yours truly, and Mr. Tomaso tanked. He bombed.
Well, I will say this much. My week did not get started off on the right foot with the way the Falcons played. I mean, I gave them way too much credit last week.
Me too.
They are pretenders and not contenders, and now they left the door wide open for Mr. Tom Brady.
Yeah, easy to do when you play in such a crappy division, and they are. That whole division, the NFC South.
The Panthers are bad.
But they were good enough to win in a rainstorm. How about that? We did call the weather correctly in that game, didn't we?
That was a soaker.
Yep.
It's one of those games where you could just tell people are like, I'm going to get wet. It's going to be okay, but I'm going to be drenched the whole game. I mean, some guys weren't even wearing hats.
It was really wild to see them play that game in Tropical Storm Nicole as that thing moved up the coast. For some reason you thought Northwestern was a good pick, and Minnesota blew their doors off.
Well, to give Pat Fitzgerald a little bit of credit, the week before they held their own against a very good Ohio State team. So I think, unfortunately, the Wildcats are in big trouble, and if there was such a thing as relegation in college football, we'd be adding UCLA and USC and probably kicking out the poor Wildcats.
Happy to say you were wrong about the Penn State game, too, because
Me too, yes.
Penn State looks like a different team now. What we have seen this year so far is that they have not had that emotional letdown after a loss. They've been able to bounce back. It looks like a different team. I think the talent is there, which you've been harping on. I'll give you a lot of credit for that. But I also think this comes down to coaching these kids differently, and also the leadership. Say what you will about Sean Clifford,
Love
but
the guy.
He knows how to not let that emotion affect you, because it's happened before. So I think when you are playing inferior teams, you know that you should go out and blow the doors off of them. I think this team has the capacity to do that. We've seen it now with Minnesota after the Michigan loss, and now with two back-to-back lesser than teams. Penn State has come out. There it is. And they've dominated, and I think too a large part of that is, and I'm going to give you some credit here too, this defense.
Unreal.
Smothering. All four quarters.
And both lines really stepping up. And I was the first to say that, I thought there would be some assistant coaching changes here happening in the offseason between Troutwine and Mr. Scott there on the defensive line.
Really
coach.
Looking good, Troutwine.
Well,
yep.
and so is John Scott, too, down on the defensive line. So I think this was the type of statement they needed this year. Yes, they don't have the big win, but their two losses are against top four teams, and nobody else is playing those teams close either. So obviously those two teams are still of the elite, but there's one thing I still want.
Mm-hmm.
Penn State is now number 11 in the AP poll, and I believe the new playoff ranking poll, whatever it's called. If it was a 12-team playoff,
you're in.
Penn State's in,
Yep.
and I think they would seal the deal in the next week.
Dan Orlovsky, the ESPN commentator, actually was talking with us. We were messaging him on Twitter, and he said the same thing. Like if you take Franklin's overall record and you take the talent here, and if the 12-team playoff was around, nobody's really saying anything about Penn State or James Franklin. And so I think that is going to change the narrative. Still got to get the signature win. Still got to go out and beat these teams. But if we can at least play well these last two games, I do think the narrative changes somewhat, and I will, again, give you credit for that going into the rest of the year. Okay, the Cowboys game, we were both wrong. The boys blew it in Green Bay.
Boy, did they ever.
We were, man, I love hearing that horn sound because I was happy we were wrong.
I'm very happy we were wrong.
Of course, the Eagles blew it too.
But this could be the Aaron Rodgers get-right game. You know, they could make a surge here.
Well,
and they're a little scary.
We're going to talk about that game because that's a weather game coming up in our Games of the Week segment. But then we had the Vikings and the Bills, and I got to tell you, good job on the Vikings. Boy, that was the game of the week. And Joe Davis, fresh off the World Series calls that game. And he was talking about that. It was on The Athletic. Richard Deitch interviewed him, and what an article that was, because Joe's like, just happened to be at the right place, the right time for the right game. You know, I didn't that was one of the ones I got wrong with the under, but man, the Vikings, what a game.
Well, and again, their only loss, the Vikings right now, stands with the Eagles. And I want to bring in our audio engineer here, Mr. David Shiner, because now that I bring up the Eagles and I bring up the Cowboys, we got to talk a little NFC East action. And I think, you know, we didn't talk about the Eagles as much leading into this week because we were thinking they're playing the Commanders. They have a commanding lead, no offense to the Commanders, over the division and the NFC for the most part. But how about our Birds? What's going on?
Well, we know they weren't going to go 17-0, right? Like that's what I think everybody needs to like.
Yep.
All the haters that are saying, you know, like Heineke owns the Birds and all this, like pump the brakes for a minute. We knew they were going to lose a game finally, and you know what? I think AJ Brown used some expletives to explain his stance on it. But he's like, thank goodness this stuff is over about the 17-0.
Yeah,
let's move on.
I think actually that might have helped them refocus a little bit. I don't like that it came at home.
No,
but I think
interdivision you don't want to have happen either. But the big thing about that game, as poorly as I think the Eagles did play, there were 4 controversial kind of calls that happened. One, and the one I think was a no call that no one's talking about, is the first deep ball to A.J. Brown. It was ripped out of his hands. Now, that was good defense, but he also had a guy jumping on his back at the exact same time. So should there have been a flag? I don't know. I'm not saying that's – and I'm never blaming anything on the refs.
They get thrown for a lot less, I'll tell you that much.
Then the next one, obviously, the one everybody's talking about, the face mask that wasn't called, that caused the fumble that then allowed them to go up, I believe, by 5 at that point.
I believe so. You're correct,
Do we know who the referee crew was?
I mean, I couldn't call it off the top of my head.
But now Dallas Goedert's hurt too. That's probably the biggest aspect
the biggest
of it.
part of it.
Yeah, that is a blow. I mean, there's no other way to put that.
Yeah, and then obviously, you know, Quez, the fumble. I mean, that's on him. But you got to make that play. Just go down, whatever. But
and he was down. That was one of the strangest fumbles I've ever seen. He
was
down.
No,
he
wasn't
got up
on contact.
and got clobbered.
You know, but he got hit from behind, and the ball popped out. You know,
it was make your last point. Then I'm going to say one more thing.
And then the thing I think everybody's focusing on a lot, but I don't know that it would have affected the game as much, but it obviously ended the game, was the BG, late hit or roughing the quarterback, whatever you want to go. You
Touching
can look
the
at
quarterback.
You can look at it two different ways. Because he did give himself up as he goes to knee, but he doesn't slide.
It was on the kneel down.
Yeah, and Reddick's coming from the other side. BG, I don't think, actually sees Reddick, so he's trying to make a play just to tap him down. And, of course, a close to 300-pound man going full speed is not going to be able to stop in time.
Who doesn't take a knee on that play, and it's Jalen Hurts.
Probably. He probably gets the first down on his own.
Correct. So I just think that was such a shady play.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. And a shout-out to – I will give him a shout-out here, my good pal Rusty.
Rusty's famous in our ranks around
He is.
here.
He's a good friend of mine. Known him since I was 5 years old. But he said every team, this is his theory, is due for a weird game.
Oh, yeah.
And this was that game, and it was a weird things happen. Because it wasn't just a loss, right? It got weird.
Well, and the thing I think you can take away
things
from
get weird.
Too, is the fact with all those weird things happening, they still had a shot. You can't count that pitchy, woo-woo thing at the end that obviously helps some people maybe in
by the
way,
old
bet line, but who knows?
Of all people to pick that up was a 7th-round draft pick for the Eagles, who they cut and now ended up with the Commanders. I mean, again,
that's a weird
play. All this weirdness we brought up because of the Vikings game. I mean, that was also a weird game. It was a weird
Joe Davis
Sunday
talked about that
in the NFL.
In the article I read that, again, a lot of strange, weird things happen.
And this has been happening week in, week out. We have these crazy game endings and stuff.
Well, everything's close.
It's been fun to watch.
Everything's close. Yeah. I mean, every game seems like it's coming down to the fourth quarter in the NFL right now.
That's a good point, too.
But I will say this much. With all this weirdness going on, the Eagles still have the tiebreaker over the Vikings.
Correct.
Sure.
They still have a 2-game lead over the Cowboys.
Correct.
So,
and guess who we play? We play Jeff Saturday.
Mm-hmm. Which
somebody that doesn't have head coaching experience. So I like our chances. The schedule remains fairly easy.
Yeah. Can we, let's say this much, can we avoid losing when Matt Ryan took off for a 38-yard run last week? I mean, the guy's hot.
Well, and we have to go on the road. We'll get into all of that. I want to keep things moving. We've got a lot to cover here today, which is good for all of you, our listeners. Let's get back to the review because we need to cover a couple of other games. I'll run through these quickly now from last week. The Wake Forest, North Carolina game, I was right. I took the under there. And, I mean, 77 was a high number, so I just had a feeling. You were hot on Wake. Mac Brown continues to do great things.
Just keeps running.
Wake didn't show up. I'll tell you what. The quarterback there, Drake May, could be up for a Heisman.
Stud.
At least could go to New York.
Stud. But every game Mac Brown plays goes right down to the wire.
It does.
He's going to be shot.
And again, I'm going to say it again. Their defense will be a liability.
Yes.
Ole Miss, Michigan, Chiefs. Go Chiefs.
How about those Chiefs?
I'm 3 for 3 with Brett's best. And you, man, I'll tell you, Mel Tucker not coming through for you again.
No. But
didn't get that cover. Won the game, didn't get the cover.
They still worry me coming into the end of the season against Penn State. I think it'll be a tough way to end the season, but at least it's at home.
Keep an eye out on them.
Yep, keep an eye out on them. That's why I keep looking at them week after week. JMU rebounding.
One of the great stories of the season, in my opinion.
Mine too. Tulane, unfortunately, was one of the better stories in college football.
The Gus bus blew them out, ran them over.
Gus came right in there and blew out the Green Wave.
The Green Wave. So 2-7. I think it was your worst week, and now the season records have shifted, everybody. I am now on the winning side, 55-52. You are now on the losing side, 53-54. But again, this is tight. That's only a 2-game lead for me. What do you plan to do heading into this final stretch of games to ensure that you don't get a pie in the face? What do you have to do to get back?
I was just going to say, similar to the Eagles, I think the Eagles thrive when people start counting them out and start talking smack on them.
Yeah.
I'm going to come back. I like playing the dog role.
We have some different picks this week, too, so I like it. I think it is. That fueled me last week. Be that underdog, and I had a pretty good week. So it's fun, but things are tight. So let's get into the college football rankings discussion. And listen, not much has changed. TCU, shouldn't count them out. So we still have in the number. Well, hold on a second. In the number ones, because we're going to pick their game this week, but you still have Georgia unequivocally number one. You've got Ohio State. Then you've got who's next? Is it Michigan?
It's Michigan.
And then TCU.
Then TCU.
These teams are all undefeated. Now, you have really about 9 teams that are still in it because you've got those 4. You still have USC, who's in a pretty good spot, by the way. North Carolina, Clemson, maybe 7 now because I think Oregon and UCLA took themselves out. Who do you got?
They did.
Could LSU sneak in there?
I was
depending on how the rest of the
LSU's still
is
alive.
ahead of USC, which is a very interesting move by the committee.
Right.
Is that because of the path they have, possibly by
and strength of schedule?
Yeah, I think they would have beaten. If that's the case, they would have beaten Alabama and Georgia. Sure. So that's actually what I want to talk about next. You know, you focus on these rankings, and there's a lot of thought that goes into it. Overall, the committee's low-hanging fruit to criticize. I think they do a pretty good job overall, and that is somebody that thinks Penn State got screwed when they had 2 losses and should have been in over Washington in 16. But let's talk about 2 games that are known. We know at least 2. I think the only 2 going into this weekend. But we know LSU and Georgia. That's set. That's the SEC title game. What if I had told you that LSU was going to be in this game after that opening loss to Florida State?
Well, they're obviously a much different team now.
And things do change.
Yeah, and that it seems like the SEC always has that 2-loss team that might have a shot.
Well, what I'm scared of happening, and again, the 12-team playoff can't come fast enough. If Brian Kelly does what I think he could do and upset the whole balance here, you're going to have 3 teams almost guaranteed in the playoffs. 3 out of the 4 SEC teams, and to me, that's just an embarrassment to the rest of college football.
Because what about Ohio State and Michigan? If that's
Same
a
thing.
tight game, but I feel like the Big Ten doesn't get talked about the same way as the SEC.
Correct.
I'm not doing this SEC bias thing, but
I will.
I mean,
I think
there's a definite bias.
I think there is a bias,
but it's also on your radar because it's the last game you
Correct.
see too, and that I think hurts the Big Ten in general.
And the other thing is, one of those teams is going to be eliminated. Meanwhile, Tennessee still has a path too. Let's not forget about them.
I know, that's the scary part.
They're still sitting there, and they have the 2 best wins of the year. They beat Alabama and the same LSU team we're talking about. They blew LSU out at home.
They did
in Tiger Stadium. That is something that can't be overlooked. I mean, we are not giving them a shot to beat Georgia, though, are we?
Georgia still doesn't totally impress me. I don't know. There's something about them that they look gettable.
I disagree.
I can't see that.
I can't either.
Georgia just looks so much like
they look elite.
The next level.
They've had some moments. I know what you're saying, but I think when you compare them to Alabama, Alabama has looked gettable all year. Georgia, to me, has not.
They took the #1 offense in football and held them to how many points?
Well, that's true.
You know?
Right.
I'm just saying, if
that game right there,
that good,
yes. Tennessee, that game solidified to me that Georgia is the best. And then the ACC championship, you talk about a team that looks gettable. I mean, Clemson, nothing to write home about there. I don't think they're going to make the playoff, even if they beat North Carolina here. But I think North Carolina has a way in, depending on what happens. Some chaos needs to happen. What do you think of that matchup? I mean, that could be a very good game.
To me, I don't think Clemson can score with North Carolina. That's just my personal feeling on it.
Even against North Carolina's less than stellar defense.
I think they do enough because, again, Clemson does not have a quarterback right now. I mean, that's weird to say that under Dabo Swinney that he can't figure this out.
No, he can't. And, I mean, DJ is a 5-star recruit.
And he just didn't develop.
So that could be a very fun game. Now, the races, of course, are coming down to this week and Thanksgiving, rivalry week. What conference race are you most excited about here in these last 2 weeks?
I like the Big Ten West, personally.
There's always someone.
Listen, do you guys understand?
I'm totally joking.
No, of course.
No,
of course.
But I'm not. What's
could
not
it
to
be
love?
at this point? I mean, what? 4 teams are still
you
in
have
the hunt?
you have Illinois, you have Iowa, you have Minnesota, Purdue.
Purdue's in there too. Yep.
I think that's about it. But there are so many things that have to happen. It is truly like the Charlie Kelly Always Sunny board where he's screaming because we just don't know. And it really, Iowa, Minnesota play this weekend. We're going to pick that game. That's exciting. How about the Pac-12 all of a sudden? You have Oregon and UCLA blowing it.
Yeah.
And now we don't know who's going to be in the
everybody
championship
was real
game.
high on Oregon coming out saying like, they're not the same team they were week 1 when they lost. Like, look at what they're doing.
They are who we thought they were.
Well, Bo Nix is who we thought he was.
Yeah,
but what if they come back this week and beat Utah at home?
Still, I think they blew it. I really do. I think they blew it. Washington was the inferior team. They should have won.
Yep.
And then on top of that, UCLA, the chip ship, falling to Arizona.
Yeah.
Not
really
good.
bad, really
Not
bad.
good.
No, and they're out of it. And then USC presumably is going to play one of these teams in Vegas for the Pac-12 because they're doing what the Big 12 does. It's the best 2 teams. There's no divisions anymore in the Pac-12,
which is the way the Big 10 should go.
Well, and it will after
that
next
way.
year. Next year, one more year of it. But that's interesting. Let's talk about the NFL because it's a little early in the NFL to start talking about playoffs. You mentioned the NFC East. It's a strong division, but the Eagles still have a pretty solid lead. And there's some really bad divisions. And then you have both the South leagues, the AFC and the NFC, stink.
They do.
The South
They
divisions,
do.
right? And now the door is open for Tom Brady to come in. Let's look ahead over the next month or so. What teams can kind of save their season? Let's start with Green Bay because you brought them up earlier.
Well, Green Bay still has a path forward. I mean, the Vikings need to start losing a few games for them to get back in the divisional race. But as I said about baseball, all you need to do is get in. And do you want to face Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs? I certainly don't.
No, do you want to face Tom Brady? Because they fly halfway across the world to Munich, and they beat Pete Carroll, and all of a sudden, they're back.
They're back.
Yeah, I mean, can we just get rid of Brady already?
The guy wins.
They could be a 9-8 team this year, sneak in that 7th seed, and I don't want them coming to Philly.
And that's
no,
the thing about
not
it.
At all.
No, because
all
again,
this undefeated talk.
Right.
I mean,
it doesn't
to
matter.
me, it doesn't matter.
No.
You just got to find a way in, and you could be the number one seed, have a week off, and fall as you get back into things.
And what's going on out west? Speaking of Pete Carroll, the Seahawks, are they in it? Are they not in it? We know that you've got all those LA teams and the California teams that seem kind of locked up out there in terms of who's going to win it, because San Francisco looks good one week, and then the next week I'm not so sure.
And I think we can officially say the Rams might be out of it, losing
they're
Cup,
out of it.
and then is Stafford coming back at this point?
They do not look
Aaron
well.
Donald can't score.
They've had
enough
injuries.
points for you,
He can't play tight end for you.
No,
They've had injuries. So there's going to be some races, though, that, tell me who's going to win that division, the NFC West. I don't know.
It looks like the Seahawks at this moment, but
And by the way, they were counted out. Right?
They were, and I'll say this much:
Geno Smith,
the revival. So maybe the problem all along was Russell Wilson. I hate to say it.
Listen, certainly looks that way from
but I think San Fran is a pretender. I really do.
I'm with you on that. I'm with you.
I really was upset leading into the broadcast. I don't know if you heard this little tidbit as the game started, but one of their pundits, I don't know if it was Sims or the other guy, came out and said that they thought San Fran was the hardest team to beat here moving forward for the NFC. And I'm like,
Do you like Kyle Shanahan, though? I do. I just don't think he has the team.
I don't think he has the team, and I think his time's starting to run out a little bit.
It's going to be an interesting race. Okay, let's talk some weather highlights over the weekend. Do we have the big map? Did we put that in, Danny?
We do, of course.
Because we're just gonna talk highlights, and then we're going to get into some specifics. But what's interesting, we have this northwest flow. One of the biggest highlights that we are going to see is the cold air, because we're going to talk about games in Minneapolis this weekend. We're going to talk about games in Buffalo and New England, and we've got some major lake effect snow. Notice, though, the rest of the country does look pretty quiet. I think the weather this weekend for these outdoor games is going to be about cold and snow, and everybody else kind of gets a break. Would you agree with that?
I agree, and we dodged a bullet here because going back just a few days ago, there looked like there was a coastal storm forming for Sunday, and it's now out to sea.
It's still on the map, but it's out to sea, and I don't think anybody's going to have to worry about that. Okay, now it's time to start a new segment. This is kind of a quick hitter because we're going to get into games of the week here in a bit, but first, we're going to talk Would You Rather. This is me asking you. Now, you've not seen these games.
I have not seen it.
I'm just going to ask Would You Rather here. We're going to do Would you rather take Tulane at home against SMU, 3 points favorite, or another home favorite, Michigan against Illinois, and lay those 18 points? Which would you rather take there? And I'm telling you, you have to bet on these games.
SMU, Tulane, and I say that only because weather could be a huge factor in any of the games around the Great Lakes, and this is going to be a physical game between Illinois and Michigan. And I don't know if we know enough about Michigan yet. That's the other
but I'm starting to feel that Illinois may be a bit of a pretender.
I agree, but
you think it's a big number, is what you're saying.
You just watch. Brett Bielema might rally these guys together.
That game, you're going to pick it actually coming up. But you basically what you're saying is you'd rather take the smaller number here.
I would take the smaller number again. A little bit more of a known quantity in Tulane, in my opinion. We just saw them play against a very good UCF team, whereas Michigan, I still don't know yet.
Let's go into the next one here. Would you rather take a Liberty at home? Virginia Tech going to Liberty, 9.5, or Purdue, a big home favorite, 20 points, Northwestern?
Well, I would take Liberty because I think Brent Pry is in a lot of trouble at Virginia Tech. They just don't seem to have the horses.
I'm with you, and I think Northwestern, they can be weird.
They can be weird.
You never know about that. That's a big number for Purdue. How about Duke taking on Pittsburgh on the road, 7.5-point underdog, or would you rather take Boston College as the underdog at Notre Dame?
Boston College has had a big weekend. I'm very curious to see if Notre Dame can rebound from a very poor showing in the second half against Navy.
Yeah, 21, big number. So they might be able to cover that more than Duke can. Interesting. You're going to take BC if you had to there. Next game up, Kansas State, West Virginia. West Virginia, the home dog here at 7.5. Or do you take another home dog in Rutgers to keep it close against Penn State this weekend? Which do you like?
I'm done picking the spread against Penn State. I'm done with that.
Probably smart.
I will take the Kansas State game.
Good. All right. Next up, we've got a couple more here. See, isn't this fun? Would you rather take Texas -9 at Kansas, which could be a sneaky good game? That was in contention for under the radar game of the week, by the way. Didn't make it, but it was close. Or how about Auburn? Carnell Williams getting some buzz down there on the Plains. Auburn 5.5 at home.
I take Auburn because I think Kentucky or Western Kentucky just won't be able to keep up with them.
That's a weird line, though, Dan, for a team that's certainly not on the same level. Auburn is only 5.5 points favored. That's a weird line.
I take them.
Okay.
Could Auburn, after all of this nonsense, could they become bowl eligible?
Well, it's possible, and I think Brian Harsin leaving is probably the best thing to happen.
By the way, Sark's team is nothing but inconsistent.
And again, this is if you had to do it.
Correct.
I like that reasoning. That's probably more so than anything Auburn's doing. I like that. Texas Tech on the road at Iowa State, a close spread here, 3.5. Or do you take the close spread with Arkansas at home against Ole Miss? Who do you like, Arkansas, or would you rather take Texas Tech? Two close ones.
Iowa State, I don't think, is the same Iowa State we've seen in years past. So
Certainly not.
I would take Texas Tech. Something with Lane Kiffin's team kind of has hit the brakes a little bit all of a sudden.
And they have to go to Arkansas.
They have to go to Arkansas. KJ Jefferson, if he plays, is still a monster of a quarterback.
Yeah, that's a question, though, if he plays. But again, can Lane recover from the beatdown there
I'm not sure.
from Alabama? Because they let that go. That was like a Penn State performance, one of those big games. They had it all the way.
And couldn't finish.
And Lane didn't run the ball. All right, Colorado at Washington. Now, these are two. This is the last one of this segment, but I wanted to give you two big ones. Woo. Do you take Washington and lay the 31 at home, or do you take Air Force and lay the 22 at home? Because both of these teams are facing the Colorado schools, and both Colorado schools stink.
They're woeful.
They're woeful. It's bad.
I would take the Washington game just because of what they just did against Oregon.
Yep.
Colorado is a bad football team, and it's a shame. They used to be one of the perennial powers.
When we were growing up, they mattered. They mattered.
Nebraska.
Yep.
Nebraska and Colorado, two cases of two programs
I think
falling
even
off.
Nebraska, though, is in better shape than Colorado. Not by much.
Not by much.
But they did it. Fun there. Would you rather?
I liked it.
I think we'll do it. I think we'll do it most weeks now because I like to pick your brain on that stuff. But now it is time for
Games of the Week.
And, of course, these games talking weather, and we're going to have a lot to talk about. We're picking the prime game again, the Titans and the Packers. That's at 8:15. Give me the lines there, Dano, because we do expect this to be a tight one. Packers -3 at Lambeau, and that's frozen tundra this Thursday night.
There's a lot of talk about should Ryan Tannehill still be the quarterback of the Tennessee Titans. And I think the Packers, again, this is another opportunity for them to get right. It's Amazon Prime night.
Yeah.
Can they do it?
It is, yeah. TCU at Baylor here. Now, you made a little dig at TCU earlier. They're only 2.5-point favorites against a team that just got blown out at home by Kansas State. That should tell us something, too, right? That's a weird line.
TCU is not the number 4 team in the country. There are better teams than TCU. I don't know if it's this game that trips them up. I believe they have Iowa State after Baylor.
Yeah, but they are undefeated.
It
is tough to go undefeated, Dan.
It is very tough to go undefeated. I think they get tripped up one of these weeks. This line is a little sneaky.
Smelly line there. And then you got Bedlam at 7:30. That's the ABC game with Kirk Street and Chris Feller. Oklahoma, 7.5 favorite. Now, I know how bad Mike Gundy has looked the last couple of weeks because they really fell off too, but I mean, this is an Oklahoma team that just lost to a terrible West Virginia team. I mean, this game is only intriguing because I'd like to...
Of the history.
Yeah, of the history. I'd like to see which... I wrote on here one of my best bet segments this week. It's going to come down... It's not this game, but I wrote it's going to come down to which team is less bad. And I think that's really what this game is going to be about. Now, we do have some weather to talk about for these games. So let's... Oh, I'm sorry. We do have two more.
We have 5 more. 2 more.
Yeah, the Pac-12 one. This is a big game. 10:30, Pac-12 after dark. The Ducks could be quacking. And in
I
Eugene,
won't stay awake for it.
Unfortunately, I won't either, but it's 2 8-2 teams. I mean, that is a heck of a football game. And then the game to end all games, the Browns at the Bills. And we're going to talk about why this is so important because it could make history. And we're going to show you that here with the weather.
I just pictured the NFL films.
Yeah. Remember Harry Callis?
Yep. Oh, of course. HK.
Doing that? Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the weather. Thursday night in Green Bay, cloudy, but I also expect some snow during this game.
I do too.
How
at least
ugly,
around the stadium.
Yeah. How ugly is that going to be? 29 degrees. That's the high. Watch this as we head into Thursday night.
Look at all these snow bands.
Yeah. Look at the snow bands around the stadium, and then again, temperatures are going to be in the 20s for the game.
Whew.
Al better bundle up.
Al better bundle up. I'm sure he's going to be a curmudgeon yet again. The winds will be strong out of the west and northwest, so that's a chilly one. But the chill extends all the way down to the south, and we saw this past weekend. I mean, watching some of the SEC games where guys are bundled up, I got a kick out of watching Mike Leach all bundled up like it's wintertime.
But we're right here in the heart of Tornado Alley, but no tornadoes this week. Just chill in Big 12 country. Norman and Waco, a couple of nice days for a game. Now, they've got some showers around, it looks like, in Waco
It
for
may be
Saturday.
Damp. It may be damp.
A little damp.
Something to watch there, but temperatures do improve slightly during the day, but starting out near freezing. So maybe not the best tailgate weather there in Waco compared to normal.
Yeah, and look at that. There's a front close by. That's why there's going to be a little bit of a breeze in Waco, too. So keep an eye out. That is a 2.5-point line.
Mm-hmm. Tight.
Field goal kickers, college kickers, that could come into play. Eugene, as we mentioned before, no real weather here. It looks nice on Saturday, and for once the Pacific Northwest catches a break.
But it is chilly. I mean, temperatures will be in the 30s. I don't think that'll have a huge impact on the game. Winds out of the west and northwest, I mean, not really registering, pretty light. So all in all, pretty nice day there. But again, the chill across the country is lingering, and that brings us to Buffalo, New York, Orchard Park.
And not only is this game expected to be snowy, but it's really the lead up to this game, because Thursday, Friday, and I actually wrote in the column this week, Dan, I included, and it's rare that I do this, but I included for the Buffalo Bills section here, I actually wrote the National Weather Service discussion, which says heavy lake effect snow, expected total snow accumulations of 2 to 3 feet. In the most persistent lake effect snows, the heaviest snow expected late Thursday night through Friday night, when snowfall rates could exceed 2 inches per hour. Snowfall totals of up to 4 feet will be possible. Now, look at the winds here on Sunday. It is going to be windy, and even into the day on Sunday, we expect that there's still going to be this lake effect snow machine kicking up. So you've got 20 to 25 mile an hour winds. Now, look at these snow bands setting up. Watch this, Dan. Oh, no, this is the actual snow.
This is the actual snow.
Talk about this.
The snow bands. So the snow bands were pretty continuous there Thursday through Sunday, but we're just letting this run, and it just keeps adding up. And I will tell you, lake effect snow, depending on where those bands set up, can be some of the most unpredictable snows you will ever see. It looks like a thunderstorm coming across the lakes.
And look at that. Now, that's just into... Now, that's through the game. You're talking about over a foot of snow. But, again, if they are bullseyed here, you could get 2, 3, 4 feet of snow.
So maybe this is why they talk about a dome in Buffalo.
I think so. I think it could be a historic game with the snow really setting up nicely. And it could be fun to watch. The Buffalo Bills taking on the Cleveland Browns in the snow. That is on Sunday at 1 o'clock. So here's our picks for games of the week. Dan, I'm sorry to disagree with you here. Well, the Packers played well. I think it was more about the Cowboys' implosion. The Titans are 6-3.
Was Mike McCarthy a part of that?
Well, he was there. They won control of the AFC South. I think they get it. I'm going to pick the Titans with the outright win on Thursday Night Football.
I'm going to go with the Packers. I think, again,
they're going to have to run the ball. Derrick Henry's going to be fine, but you agree it's going to be more of a slugfest with the snow.
I think it's going to be a slugfest. It could be a low-scoring game. You know, points are hard to come by on Thursday Night Football, so we shall see. But, you know, again, I can't see Aaron Rodgers missing the playoffs. Something's going to give here.
Well, listen, we will find out, but we differ on that one. Now, despite your really calling out of TCU, we both are on them this week to cover that. I just, if Baylor had shown up last week, I'd feel more confident in them, but something's off there, too, with Dave Aranda's squad.
Right, and he was up for some big jobs, and maybe
yes,
he's
been
doing more interviewing than coaching, so we'll see about that. But I take TCU with the 2.5. It's a small enough point spread.
Yeah, here's another game that we differ on. You're going to pick the Sooners and Brett Vulnerables.
He is very vulnerable.
Yes, I think he is.
There's also, I think, something going on with Mike Gundy. Again, he had the squad this year. He had the quarterback, and just down the stretch here has really disappointed.
Well, yes. And again, to me, flip a coin here. The one thing I do know is this game means so much to Mike Gundy. He loves to stick it to Oklahoma.
He does.
And this would be the year. I mean, this is a team, too, that I know you can't go week to week. It's a different team every week, but they got their butts handed to them in West Virginia. I think Mike Gundy will show up. And I don't know if he can win, but he can keep it close. I'm going to take him plus 7.5.
We shall see.
The Oregon one, we essentially agree. I think the line's weird here. I don't know whether. I think this could be an offensive game, but I'm just going to pick Oregon money line and roll with them at home.
I go Ducks -3. I'm not super impressed with the Utah Utes. Again, they were so hyped up coming into the season. I've yet to be impressed by them.
Yeah. Well, listen, they did beat UCLA.
They did.
They did beat USC.
They did.
No, I'm sorry. UCLA beat Utah. Yeah, that was one of their losses. I meant USC.
Yep.
They did beat USC. It's their only loss.
Correct.
So we'll see. Listen, this game, I'm done with the Bills. I've talked about that. They burned me one too many times. There's only one play here to me, and it's the under, given the weather, and I don't know about the Bills. They are a good team, but I can't take them to cover 8 points. And, I mean, look at what happened with Minnesota. And I know Minnesota's a good team. I also, it's one of those where, like, 43, that's pretty low. You want to take the over. But, again, I can't in good conscience do that. So, to me, I'm just going to go under 43 and hope.
Well, I at home, the Bills, I think, have an advantage here. The Browns are kind of a middling team to me. I take the Bills to win. I agree. I don't think they cover 8.5.
It's a lot in that type of weather.
It's a lot. But could it be a 2 or 3 point game? I could see it.
All right, and now it's time to go
under the radar.
Speaking of the Big Ten and the Big Ten West race, this is a game. I almost went, I said with Texas and Kansas, but how about Iowa, Minnesota in some Big Ten weather? Minnesota's favored here by 3 points. Dan, look at the over-under.
32.5.
How do you like that? It's tempting.
It's tempting, but I will say, what if it's like a 5-3 game?
Well, again, that's what I mean. It's tempting to take that under.
I mean, I could just see
but I also
some of the ugliest football you have ever witnessed.
Well, it's going to be some of the ugliest weather. Look at these temperatures. Explain.
This is brutal.
This is a truly Arctic air mass, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is the coldest air of the season we've seen thus far, which, again, is not only affecting the Great Lakes, it's coming into the Northeast, but temperatures during the day don't even get out of the teens.
This is a night game, by the way. It starts at 4.
So, sun setting early.
Look at that.
Look at that drop by 7, 8 o'clock, single digits. Plus, this is always the biggest factor. And again, the cold is just different in the Midwest.
Yes.
It's dry. It's hard to handle. You get the winds blowing across the plains. Wow, 10 to 15 mile per hour winds on top of those single digit temperatures.
That is some brutal weather. This is, again, some of these games, even though, I mean, it could be a 5-3 game, these games are going to be fun to watch. But I'm not going to be tempted by the under as much as I want. Little difference here. I still think Minnesota could be the best in the West. I think they are built to be that way offensively. And let's not underscore their defense. They've got a pretty stout defense, too. And I just look at both of these teams and I think, what is the weakest unit on that field? And even though they've been putting up points recently, I still say it's Iowa's offense. And I'm going to take P.J. Fleck to row that boat and get it done.
I've seen this movie one too many times in my college football fandom. Kirk Ferentz finds a way. He wins this game. They end up in the Big Ten championship. They
by the way, if they win this game, that's not a
it's
given
not a given,
yet.
But I think it's the stepping stone.
But it could be the stepping stone. So we differ on that, and he could do it again, and then he'll bring back Brian Ferentz next year and put everybody through.
And wouldn't it be something if they get into the Big Ten?
Through that again.
If they go into the Big Ten championship and knock off one of the biggies?
Well, it's not going to happen. I mean, they are not equipped.
Stranger things have happened, my friend.
Well, again, per my buddy Rusty, things get weird, but they don't get that weird. All right, cue us up, Dave Shiner.
Time now for Brett's Best.
How about Jim Mora?
What a job. Bowl eligible at UConn.
They were 1-11 last year, and they're taking on Army.
And a not great Army team. This is a gettable game for UConn.
That's what I'm thinking, and that's a little tip-off. I like UConn to I like the underdog there, the Husky. They're an underdog.
Yes,
okay?
Sir.
And then I tipped my hat. This game to me is going to be which team is less bad, Indiana and Michigan State, right? And I think it's Michigan State. They showed up against Illinois. They're a 10.5-point favorite. This is at home. There's going to be some wind. There's going to be some snow. We watched Indiana take on Penn State. I mean, Indiana's not a good team.
No, and they have quarterback problems as well. I'm looking at Michigan State's record because
they're 5-5.
Okay, so this would make them bowl eligible.
Correct. That's another reason I like them. And again, just the weather. They're used to it in East Lansing. Tuck coming.
Tuck coming. Now,
Tuck coming.
I was a little bit too eager with them, but still, I hate looking ahead. I want Penn State to beat Rutgers, obviously, but oof. I hate this matchup coming up at the end of the year.
Hold on. Let me just say, at least with the Penn State matchup, we are at home for that.
We
game.
are at
so
home.
That I like. Yeah.
If it could be a weather game, we're talking about the impact of weather. Just something to keep your eye on. If you are a Penn State fan, I would advise watching this game and seeing what Michigan State's got.
I would agree. I would agree. Eagles at Colts. I'm going to go with the Birds, -6.5. I think they get back on track against a guy that's never coached before other than last week. I like our coaching. I like our talent. I think the Eagles know they have to get back on track and start. They want to start to lock some things up, including the NFC East. I think they can take care of business.
I think they take care of business. I think it's a refocusing. And, for all the people that said that they needed to lose a game, all right, you got your chance.
Yep.
Here we go.
No, and it's out of the way now. So that's another thing. I think they kind of, this will refocus them. So those are my best. How about your 3 games this week?
Right.
It's Doppler Dandies.
So we mentioned Army not being the same Army. Navy hasn't been the same Navy as well. I think they only have 3 wins, and they take on a hot UCF team. But even with all that said, Navy played their butts off in that second half against Notre Dame. Notre Dame had that game in control in the first half, and all of a sudden it became in question late. I think Navy keeps this closer than what I think is a fairly significant line there at 16.5, and an over-under of 53. I think it's assuming too many points.
Armed Forces Week here in the podcast.
It is.
I like it.
It is.
We salute all of them.
Give them some love.
Yeah, give them some love. And here's your game.
Here is my game. It's the Bielema versus Harbaugh game. I think it's going to tell us a lot about Michigan. If they blow the doors off Illinois, great.
Then look out Ohio State.
You're right. But something just tells me the first half is going to be like 14-10. I have this feeling because unlike Penn State, I don't think Illinois is going to give up those huge runs.
Yeah, they're going to maybe clamp it down. And again, they are physical.
And this is, let's face it, this now is probably Illinois' Super Bowl.
It is. And they could still win the Big Ten West if they can beat Michigan.
They could.
They need this win. That's actually a very good point.
Uh-huh.
And they're probably the most physical team Michigan has faced.
And do we have to listen to Gus Johnson on this call for this game? Is this the big noon?
That's a good question. It might be.
I assume it is. Why don't you look that up, and I'll talk about the Jets and Patriots. The Jets and Patriots, which going back to when I first started really following the NFL, and you had Rex Ryan and the Jets, and you had Bill Belichick and the Patriots, and it was always tight.
Yes.
These games were always tight,
but
I think
Bill
we're
loves
renewing
feasting on the Jets.
He does. He does. I just don't know if he has all the horses. We have an answer there, Mr. Shiner.
It is a noon kickoff, but it is on ABC.
Okay, well.
Okay, there you go.
Maybe I'll be able to watch it then.
There you go.
I can't stand these big noon kicks. I'll watch our ABC friends.
Well, you can watch it. Just watch Gus on mute.
Well, I do that sometimes. I will
Yeah.
actually mute the game. I'll be doing something else. I believe I'm actually putting up the Christmas tree Saturday, so
There
maybe
you
this
go.
will be on in the background. Some football and some good smelling coffee, and it'll be a good morning.
That sounds delightful.
But
so,
anyway,
back to Bill Belichick.
Do you know who I love more than Bill Belichick?
Who?
Bailey Zappi.
I
mean, salt of the earth. Backup quarterback.
It's Sean McDonough on the call, by the way.
Oh, I love Sean.
So there you go.
Sean's a good
Todd
one.
Blackledge, Sean McDonough.
Oh, yeah, Toddy.
So, what are you saying, though, about the Jets?
Well, I think the Jets are good.
Mm-hmm.
I do think they are good. I wonder how they stack up against Bill Belichick. This will be a good litmus test for them. I think it could make things super interesting if the Jets pull this off.
They would have a win against everybody in their division this year, which would be impressive. And they could have some weather, too. I mean, it's not going to be totally brutal.
Speaking of which, we
There it
have
is.
that forecast. So
Yeah.
temperatures, Foxborough actually one of the warmest places. So it's one of these weird things.
Yeah,
that while
51.
there's feet of snow to their west in Buffalo, New York, it's all about wind direction, and they're getting a little bit more flow from the south and off the water. 51 degrees, not too bad in Foxborough. And throughout the day, again, there will be snow coming in from the lakes off to their west, but they should be relatively quiet. Again, I don't think weather is going to be a big factor. There may be a couple of snow or rain showers around, but nothing too significant. And then finally, the winds out of the southwest or out of the south to start out. That's what keeps things relatively mild, and it pretty much stays that way throughout the game. Gets a little windy,
breezy
as the game goes on.
And again, it's a field goal line, so I always like to point that out. When the
That's
lines
why we're
are,
doing this.
Yeah, when the lines are 3 points or less, when that wind kicks up, just be aware that could have an impact. So let's get to the summary here this week.
Final picks.
Again, we differ on the Thursday night game. Could be a fun one at Lambeau. Titans for me, Packers to cover for you. We both like TCU. We're going reverse in Bedlam.
Reverse in Bedlam.
Yep. We both like Oregon. I'm going to take the under in that snowy Cleveland-Buffalo game. You like the Bills. We are different. You're going to pick Kirk Ferentz and Brian. You're going to pick the Ferentz family to get the win.
I'm going to pick nepotism over the row the boaters.
Give me the Huskies to cover the 10 points. I think they can do it against a weaker
What
than...
a great story.
Yeah, it is. And against a weaker than the normal Army team coming. And then we got the Eagles, too, getting things right this week.
And I certainly hope they do for everyone's sake, or I think Philly's going to lose their mind. Anyway, I take Navy to keep things close.
Couple of dogs for you,
Yes,
Alan.
Illinois, again, they may not win outright, but this game I think is going to going to be closer than the 18 points, and if it's not, then that's everything we need to know about Michigan and sets up a huge tilt.
I love it.
Tilt.
Well, thanks, everybody. That is a review of this week. We are certainly hoping we have flipped the script. I'm back in the lead. Dan,
I
on the
door
losing
a little
side,
too much.
You did, so you need to get back on it. That's going to be a wrap for this week. Enjoy the cold and the snow, and remember how you can find us. Write to us at weatherwagers@gmail.com. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. Thanks to Dave Shiner as well. Dan, take us away.
Have a good week, everyone. Go Birds. Right the ship. Go State.